Hello and welcome to Tuts Plus. My name is Martin Perhiniak. In this video, I'm going to show you the 10 most important things you need to know about working with vectors in Photoshop. Now, although Photoshop is mainly a pixel image editing application, there are loads of useful features for working with vectors. These tools are mainly here in the toolbar, and we have different types of pen tools, then type tools, and then the path and direct selection tools and the shape tools. In this video, I'm going to talk about mainly these features, but I'm going to concentrate on the less known features of these tools. And I would like to start with the Freeform Pen Tool. Now, the pen tool is quite difficult to get used to the way it works, but for those who would like to just start out using vector shapes or drawing vector shapes without learning to use how to work with curves and handles and anchor points, you can start using the Freeform Pen Tool. Because with this one, you can actually draw paths and create anchor points without actually placing down one by one. So it's more of an automatic way of placing down these anchor points. And you can even use the magnetic option, which is quite similar to the magnetic lasso tool, because it will try to find edges in your composition. So let me just go back one step and check magnetic. And then if I try to draw over, for example, here around this shape, you can see how nicely it finds the edges. And we can always add later to this. So instead of doing this manually with the pen tool, I used the Freeform Pen Tool with the magnetic option turned on. And if you want, you can always customize how the magnetic feature works by going into the settings, and here you will have curve fit, width, contrast, and frequency. And you even have a pen pressure option if you use a pressure sensitive tablet. So it's good to know that you are not confined with the pen tool if you want to draw vector shapes and paths in Photoshop, but you can also use the Freeform Path tool. It's not as accurate as the pen tool, but you can always make changes later on to the paths that you created with the Freeform Pen tool. There's another feature which can help you to work with the pen tool, and that is called the rubber band. Because whenever you work with the pen tool, you won't really see what's going to happen next, what your next path segment will look like, until you actually place down an anchor point. So in case of drawing straight lines, it's quite easy to see what's going to happen or predict what's going to happen. But in case of drawing curves, like let's just say I click and drag and created a curve here, the next curve segment I will only see once I click and start dragging. So before that, I don't really see a preview of how my next curve segment will look like. Now, to be able to see that, again, we have an additional option for the pen tool called rubber band, which if I turn on, then whenever I draw, I will be able to see the curve segment even before I placing down an anchor point. And that is very useful, especially for those who just start using the pen tool, because with this one, you can really see before creating a path segment how it will turn out. So I really like to use this feature, and I most of the time have it on, and only rarely I turn it off when I feel like it's in the way. There are a couple of useful keyboard shortcuts which is good to use with the pen tool. So while you are drawing with the pen tool, whether you use the rubber band feature or not, whether you draw curves or straight lines, you will be able to access temporarily the direct selection tool, which is great to be able to move things around a bit. So to be able to do that, you just need to hold down Command or Control on PC, and with that you can move anchor points around or handle points as well. So it's very easy to edit your path while you are working with it, and then when you let go Command or Control on PC, it switches back immediately to the pen tool and you can continue drawing your shape. If you want to draw straight lines, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal lines, you should hold down Shift. because with that you can draw lines like this. That's another useful keyboard shortcut for the pen tool. And last but not least, Alt or Option can convert corner points into curve points, or vice versa. So if I hold down Alt, it switches my cursor into the convert anchor point cursor or tool, and then I can click on a corner point like this and turn it into a curve point by adding handles on it. And I can do the same thing on a curved point, just Alt clicking on it to turn it into a corner point. So Command, Control, Alt and Option and Shift, they all have useful features for the pen tool, so it's worth investing time into learning these keyboard shortcuts. Previously to Photoshop CC, we always had problems with using the free transform tool on rounded cornered shapes. Changing the rounded rectangle's shape with the free transform tool would result in distorting the rounded corners. But now in Photoshop CC, that's not the case anymore, because we can use the free transform tool easily, and thanks to the live shape properties, we won't have any problems. The corner radius will be the same, so it won't be distorted. But if you don't have Photoshop CC, what you should use instead of using the free transform tool is the direct selection tool. So selecting that, and then click and drag over the part which you would like to modify. So I only selected one side of my shape, and if I want to make this a bit narrower, I just hold down Shift and press right arrows, or hold down one of these points and drag them by holding down Shift. So that's another way of doing the same thing, but in previous versions of Photoshop. Even in Photoshop CS6, this is the way you should do it, because there you won't have the live shape properties option. That is only available in the Creative Cloud version of Photoshop. Mentioned already in the previous segment, the live shape properties are only available in the Creative Cloud version of Photoshop. And you can see them in the Properties panel whenever you select a path, a vector shape, or a vector mask. The options you have here, first of all, is the size of your shape, which you can change very easily by clicking and dragging one of these numbers, or one of the values. Actually, you have to click and drag W, for example, to change the width, or H to change the height. It's a very fast and easy way to do it, or you can of course dial in the number that you need. Then you can also change the position with X and Y. You can change the fill color very easily of your shape. You can also add a stroke color to your shape, and then you can also choose the size of the stroke. So here you can change the stroke size, and then you can also create dashed lines, where you can even specify how the dashed line should look like. You can have dotted lines as well for the stroke. Then you can change the alignment of the stroke. It can be set to inside, or center, or outside. And if you have endpoints in your path, for example, you can change the endpoints, and you can also change the joints of your shapes. So here you can customize how they will look like. And then the best part is how to work with rounded corners, because here you can click on any of these values and very easily change any of the round corner radius. So that can be connected to each other or linked to each other, or they can be different as well. So you can have one of them set to 0, for example, and the others use a larger radius. So these are the live shape properties option, and remember, you will always see this in the properties panel whenever you select a path in Photoshop. Another great feature in Photoshop CC is that we can now merge vector shapes together without rasterizing them. So if I create another shape here, like that, and if I select these two layers together and press Command or Control E on PC, I will be able to merge them together but still maintain them as vectors. So in this case, I have one joint vector shape layer with two paths. So with the path selection tool, I can still select these shapes separately, and I can move them around very easily. So I can decide how I want these two elements to interact with each other. And I can always add new shapes to this as well. And I can even add, for example, an ellipse. If I hold down Shift, it will be a perfect circle. And now I have three shapes in the same vector shape layer. In case you want to merge these paths together and form only one path from all this, so you would like to have this outline turned into a path, all you need to do is to select the three paths together with the path selection tool, and then from the path operations, choose Merge Shape Components. Once you choose that, then it will say that this operation will turn a live shape into a regular path, so you won't be able to do anything like this anymore. So I'm going to click on yes, and then you will see that we won't have any more live shape options available. It became a regular path. The advantage of merging them together and losing the live shape properties is that now it's much more simplified and easier to work with the path like this, and because you can still move these points around, so I can always make selections and move this part down, for example, or I can move this point away, so I can still make changes to it, but now I only work with an outline instead of having shapes separately. It's good to know that you can do both. You can keep them as shapes and move them separately like that, or you can turn them into an outline and work like that if that's what you need. When you have several paths in the same vector shape, you can also choose path operations to decide how these paths interact with each other. So for example, if I select this shape here, I can choose a different path operation either from the properties panel, if it is a live shape that you are working with, or you can also use it from here on the options bar. So at the moment it's set to combine shapes, which will just simply add them to each other. But you can also choose subtract front shape, which will remove this shape from the other one. And the good thing is that we can still move it around, so we can place it anywhere where we want it. And you can even use the free transform tool to resize it, for example, and it will still have the live shape properties option. The only thing that will make you lose the live shape properties if you rotate a shape with rounded corners. When I press enter, it will warn me again that it has to turn this path into a regular path if I want to do this. I just wanted to show you that it's good to know that that's something that will make you lose that feature. But let's just go back to the path operations. So we saw subtract and combine, but what else is there? If I select this shape, I can still change the path operations from the options bar. I can set it to intersect shape areas, and that means that now this shape and the other shape, only their intersecting part or overlapping part will be visible. So if I move this other shape around, then again, only the overlapping areas will be visible. And last but not least, we have the exclude overlapping shapes, which is like the opposite or inverted version of the intersection, because in this case, anything that is overlapping between these two shapes won't be visible, but anything outside of that will be visible. And it's good to know that you can set a path operation to any of the paths in a shape layer. So for example, these two are set to exclude, or actually this one is set to exclude, but I can set this one up to subtract, for example. So now I have the circle set to subtract, this rectangle, rounded rectangle set to exclude, and this one is set normally just to simply combine shapes. Once you start using path operations, you should also learn about path arrangement, because just like layer structure, you also have a structure between the paths that you have in a shape layer. So you have paths on top of other paths. So for example, if I have this circle set to subtract, and that means it will subtract this shape from anything that is below it, then I can decide that I would like this to affect one of my shapes but not all of them. So for example, if I set that back to combine this rectangle and I move it somewhere here, then I can decide to have the circle affecting this bigger rectangle but not the smaller one. So how can I do that? All I need to do is to go to the path arrangement options and choose bring shape to front. Once I set it to front, it will be on top of the circle, and the circle won't be able to subtract from this rectangle. Because it is on top of the circle, that means it's higher in the hierarchy of these parts. So once again, here in the options bar, you can find the path arrangement options. Again, very similar to layer structure. It depends on the hierarchy between your paths. Whatever is on top will always be affecting whatever is below it. So if you haven't worked with path operations and path arrangement, make sure you spend a little bit of time on understanding these options, because they will really make a difference whenever you work with vectors in Photoshop. I would like to show you how to add color effects to a composition like this, and at the same time also show you a feature which is very useful whenever you work with paths in Photoshop. So I'm going to use the elliptical vector shape tool, the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw a perfect circle here. And I've just held down Shift to be able to do that. Once I have this, in the Properties panel, I switch to the Masks option. So I switch from Live Shape Properties to Masks, and here I can increase the feather option for this shape. So I can add a nice feathering around the edges of this elliptical shape, and I'm going to also use a blend mode for it. I will probably set it to color. I just set it to color, so it will be used for coloring, and you can see wherever I move this, it will add that blue color to the image. But to make it more obvious, I'm going to set it to something like this, a red color, or maybe let's just use something yellow. Okay, so there's that coloring effect, and I'm going to alt click and drag this coloring effect and to create another version, and I'm going to set that to purple. So we have another color here, and then alt click and drag again, set it in the middle, and on that one let's just set this to something else, maybe red. So I'm going to have a red color, maybe a darker red as well. So now we have 3 colors here, and I can move these circles around in the image wherever I want them to be. So I added a nice coloring effect on the text. Now, of course, we can always make this more stronger, so we can always set it to color dodge, for example. That will brighten and add the color at the same time. We can set it to something like multiply, for example. Once again, that will darken, or color burn, for example. So you can always play around with these options, or you can even use it as normal, or overlay will create a cool effect as well. But let me just set it back to color for now, because that's the more obvious effect, what I was looking for. And we can have a look before and after adding these colors once again. And if I want to make changes to these, or just simply select them, because it's quite difficult to find them in our composition, I can use an option for the path selection tool, and that is here in the options bar. From active layers, I can use all layers. If you have active layer selected, that means you will only be able to edit the layer that you have selected. So you won't be able to select with this tool any of the other layers. While if you have all layers selected, then you will be easily able to switch between any of your shape layers. Whichever layer you have paths in, you will be able to switch between them automatically without choosing anything from the layers panel. So this is something I use all the time, and only very rarely I turn this into active layers. Most of the time I have this feature set to all layers. And last but not least, I would like to also show you how to isolate a vector shape layer from all the other layers, because in some cases you might find it a little bit distracting to have so many layers in your layers panel. So in case you want to make sure you only affect the selected path or shape layer, you just have to have the path selection tool and double click on that shape. That will immediately isolate that shape from everything else, and that means that you won't be able to select anything else, so you will only be able to work with that selected layer. So that's again a very useful new feature of Photoshop Creative Cloud, and if you want, you can always easily switch back to see all your layers by double clicking anywhere else apart from the selected and isolated layer. And with that said, that's all that I wanted to show you about working with vectors in Photoshop. Hopefully you found some useful features along the way. And if you want to learn more about Photoshop, make sure you join me next time as well here on Tuts Plus. Thanks a lot for your attention.